I'm here with Ryan Amadian, Camp Rhonda 2620, and Dallas Stops Eviction organizer. He's also here with Diaspora. Can you tell me more about these organizations and what you do to help them?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Ryan Amadian, um, organizer with Diaspora United and Dallas Stops Evictions. A little bit more about these organizations is Dallas Stops Evictions is a housing justice coalition of different organizations, mainly socialist organizations, and we basically got together after becoming familiar with each other during the Black Lives Matter protests in the summertime, during a lot of the demonstrations and doing work with each other, we understood that since we were in the middle of a pandemic, there was record unemployment, businesses were shutting down, we have record evictions, we're in the midst of a housing crisis, right? We need to come together and organize in order to push back against this housing crisis. Because one thing we realized through the mobilization of the uprisings in the summertime was how the lack of connection between the protesters and the organizers and the people in the actual community and the issues that affected the people in the community on a day-to-day basis, whether it's when we're protesting in the streets that homeless people lay their head to rest at night, and we're disrupting their peace and quiet where they're trying to sleep, and we have no regards for our houseless neighbors, or whether we're protesting through communities, typically low income community, and we're basically just protesting for our own sakes, and they feel very disconnected to the protest because either not many people from those communities are involved in the protests, or just because they feel as though we're not looking out for the issues that actually affect them on a day-to-day basis. Whether they truly understand the severity of the racial injustices that are plaguing the United States. So that's Dallas Stops Evictions, right? We do work on multiple fronts. We obviously do eviction defense, and we help out tenants go through that legal process of getting the CDC declaration paper filled out, going to courts with them, giving them rides if they need a ride. We also do organizing, because what we realize is, even besides the evictions, the day-to-day quality of life in many apartments, especially in South Dallas, are just horrible, abhorrent. Unlivable conditions, black mold, leaks, rats, just pests in general, foundation and structural issues. Right, we're doing work in an apartment complex. The lady who called us out, her entire floor is, she lives on the second floor, so the conditions are just absolutely horrible. And we understand that the most effective way of combating these issues is collective action, right? Coming together as a group, unified collective understanding what the issues are and what the solutions are to these issues, right? Where we create a list of demands, and we get these demands signed by the tenants. We get as many tenants on board with the union, and we push these demands to the landlord and try to get them met. And ultimately, we have escalation tactics, where the media gets involved. We do press conferences. We do some kind of action to get the attention of the media as well as the landlord. If it's a public housing, then we have to get the attention of Dallas Housing Authority and HUD, which is something that we have experience with in one of the apartment complexes. So we do tenant organizing, and we do houseless organizing as well. We have a houseless committee for Dallas Stops Evictions, which is formalizing into its own separate coalition and committee of its own, focusing on unhoused work, because although they are both related to housing, the strategies and tactics look a little bit different, and obviously the struggle for the rights of the unhoused, it's only ever increasing with the way the city is trying to crack down on Camp Rhonda and all that kind of stuff. So Dallas Stops Evictions is ultimately a housing justice organization, where we battle on multiple fronts. Diaspora United, which is an organization that really got me involved with doing political work and organizing, got me into politics in general, is a anti-imperialist and anti-colonialist organization, where we understand that um, these issues, these class struggles, are much bigger than just here in America, right? They're international struggles, and we need to have solidarity with the international working class in order to confront and combat these issues.
And can you tell me more about the name Diaspora and why that name was chosen?
I'm not the founder of the organization. The founder of the organization, her name's Shawnee. But basically, I mean, ultimately, she's a Pan African, right? She has Pan African views, and essentially, the diaspora of African people is what pushed her towards naming the organization Diaspora United, right? Coming together and unifying as in diaspora, and not, because there's a lot of what can I say? There's a lot of disagreements, I guess, between people here in America who are of African descent and African people on the continent. So the point of the organization is to struggle towards building that unity instead of that division.
And can you tell me a little bit more about Camp Rhonda and the work that has been done by locals and the homeless and unhoused themselves?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, Camp Rhonda, in and of itself, is a homeless encampment that was formed out of necessity due to unhoused peoples and unsheltered people's tents being swept up. Now, a little bit of background information and how it all got formed and how the relationship with the community started in about uh, June of this last summer, so June of 2020. Um, my organization, which would be Diaspora United, we, like I said, we wanted to do more than just the mobilization of the protest, and we wanted to get more organized. So we started doing a biweekly resource replenishment, which was basically we went out and we gathered information prior to implementing this program. So we went out into this community right outside of Austin Street, which is in between Deep Ellum and Fair Park, where all the where majority of the homeless shelters are located in Dallas. There are three by name, or Austin Street Shelter, City Square, and Our Calling are located right there within about a mile, half a mile radius. And we started passing out these hygiene packs, which had PPE, which was necessary, given how bad the pandemic was being at that point in time. We understood that the city's not doing anything to provide PPE to our houseless and unsheltered folks. So they needed masks, gloves, hand sanitizers. Then we started getting more, in detail based off the information that we were gathering from the community. Um, Wipes, like wet wipes, because they don't have access to showers and hand wash stations. So they shower with the wipes. Obviously, shampoo and body wash and and razors, shaving cream, just to get into detail about what went into these packs in case anybody would like to do similar things. But ultimately, just getting these, putting together a hygiene pack or any kind of thing that's needed by the community, and we were giving those out, giving out clothes, giving out food. But the point was talking to the people in the community, building that relationship, understanding who they were, what their story is, and what issues that they're facing on a day-to-day basis. And what we understood by doing that resource replenishment for about 3. We started in July, and our last resource replenishment was in November. So we had a good, like 3 or 4 months where we're going out every other week doing this program, building the relationship with that community. And we understood that the city was sweeping up people's tents. Austin Street was putting out complaints about people's tents being on their property because they're doing construction and they're expanding. So they would call the city, which would bring out the police, which would force people to move their stuff. And if they had nowhere to go, then they would grab their tents, throw them into the trash, throw them over the barbed wire fence, causing it all to rip, causing their paperwork, their medication, their personal belongings that they've gathered just while they've been out there, things that they need to survive, were getting thrown out. And so, due to that, there was an empty lot nearby, about 5 minute walk, and the people set up their tents on this lot, out of necessity because they had. I mean, where else are people supposed to go when the shelters are turning people away? When there's no ultimate alternative that's permanent housing solution for somebody with extremely low income, no income, there are no options out there in the city, right? And so when people have no other options, where are they supposed to go? So they went to the nearest empty lot that they saw, and they set up. And from there, we helped them set up, my organization, and we instilled the idea of a community and more of a communal, uh, communal like relationship with everybody in that community, as far as understanding that if they come together as a collective, the city is less likely to harass them or sweep up their tents or throw away their belongings because they have more power in numbers. As opposed to just having a singular tent where you have to leave for the morning, whether you got to go to work or you got to go do whatever you got to do. You leave your tent there, and now the city considers it trash, so they just throw it away. They specifically wait for people to leave their tents so that they can throw them away when you just got one set up. But when you have multiple people in the immediate vicinity looking out for your belongings and looking out for your tents, as you do for yours, then the chances of that are much less.
What do you feel like the responsibility of an organization like yours is, and what do you feel like your role is to play in the assisting of the unhoused in organizing themselves?
So really, I mean, we use the same strategies and tactics that we use when we do tenant organizing. We really, for in that aspect, we want the tenants to lead the way, and because ultimately, I mean, they're the ones that live there. They know the real issues, so they should be leading the way. Same thing goes with the unhoused, right? So what we do is just the foundational stuff, the administrative stuff. We support and help out where we can and fill in where is necessary when maybe, they have too much on their plates, because ultimately, I mean, we have working class people, just everyday people that have their issues and real life stuff that they need to deal with, so they may not have the disposable time to be able to spend it organizing, right? Which is where we fill in, where those who do have that disposable time or disposable income to put down money to print out flyers or print out the list of demands or do anything. That's where we fill in and help out. But ultimately, we want uh, the people in the community who are doing work in to take the leadership positions and take the responsibility upon themselves, right? And that's basically our responsibility as an organization, is to just enforce that, create that kind of a culture where we're working alongside the people and in solidarity with them rather than leading the way, following behind us. So that's really our responsibility as an organization. But we see here doing the work with the unhoused, it's, obviously it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more complex and intricate because, um, I mean, as you can imagine, right, the difference between tenant organizing and the difference between organizing unhoused people. Many unhoused people are unhoused because of the experiences that they've had in life leading up. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's because of their personal choices or anything like that, but there many people are disabled, physically disabled. They have extreme like mental illnesses, substance addictions, and stuff like that. And none of these things justify them being unhoused or on the streets, right? Regardless of these things, people deserve housing, and people deserve to have their basic necessities that they need in order to survive. And um, because of that, it's a little bit more emotional work, right? Understanding the actual mental aspect behind it and working with the people in the community, it becomes it's a little bit more taxing. It's a bit more emotionally involved, and just trying to work and bring in like a very positive aspect as far as transformative justice goes, harm reduction, cooperation amongst the community. Like, these are things that not only are many of us are new to it as organizers, but people in the community have, just no experience with it at all. So it's like almost like reinventing the wheel as far as the way that people have been conditioned to operate and think, and what we're trying to introduce to the community, which is a much less traumatic experience for everybody involved. There's a lot of instances of violence and just acting out and stuff like that, which is normal amongst any community. Even people in houses act out like that. So like I said, none of these things justify somebody not being in a house, But ultimately, these are the things we deal with just being out there so much, and we work together as the community, as the organizations involved together towards fixing out these issues, right? Nothing's going to be perfect, but ultimately we get that when we come together and our main issue at hand is housing, when we come together, we can get our demands met and get the housing or get our rights that it is that we deserve.
I was at Camp Rhonda on a cold December evening last month, or 2 months ago, I mean, and I was wondering how you keep all the women there safe to any degree. What does the community do, and what does your organizations do?
We definitely have a very strong stance against gendered violence. Um, right? I mean, it's an active struggle. This is something that it's much easier to tackle these things if you are at the forefront of the community when it's being formed, right? Basically gatekeeping the community, making it like a fem-led community. These are things that have to actively be on top of when the community is forming, which is we weren't. Right? This community was a community who was already, they already knew each other. They were already a community over by the shelter, and now they're moving from there onto this piece of land, right? So we had no say in who gets to be on the camp, who doesn't get to be on the camp. That was already established prior to anything, right? And even then, that's something that's very hard to do as an outsider coming into a community, trying to gatekeep that very community, right? It doesn't build a very positive rapport with the people in that community. And so this is something that we've been definitely working on and tackling, since we have to work amongst this community to fix these issues. We do regular community meetings, right? If we hear anything, we immediately confront who it is that the complaints are being put out against. And our solution ultimately is to remove these individuals, these violent individuals or harmful individuals, from the camp, which is something that we don't like doing. It's not a fun time. We've only had to do it once. If that's the case, if our main thing is the safety of the entire camp, right? If it's something that puts uh, the general good of the camp at risk, then it's something that needs to be addressed immediately and taken care of. Do we have any structured way of addressing these issues? Um, to be honest, no. There is, I mean, if we've been asking around from different organizations across the nation, there is no real, I mean, solution to it. We're always open to, struggling and brainstorming and just coming to an idea of how to combat these kinds of things, because um, it's it's the easiest thing to do, but we're on top of it just about every day.
And can you tell me a little bit more about how you guys actually provide material support for the unhoused people there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's a plethora of organizations and uh, people that are just involved with Camp Rhonda. You know, on our side of things, I mean, we have our Dallas Stops Evictions Coalition, but even beyond that, there's like many wonderful organizations: Feed the People Dallas, mutual aid organizations, Say It With Your Chest, Dallas Harm Reduction Aid, Street Medics Dallas, uh, Latinx, all of these organizations just on a consistent basis either provide services such as, like, for street medics, they do medical checkups, health screenings, vital checks, helping bandage up little cuts and scrapes like that, which is essential, right? That's a very needed thing. The mutual aid organizations like Feed the People and Say It With Your Chest, they come out and on a consistent basis. They have a bi-weekly community care program where they to feed, a community cleanup, give out clothes, just basic, like, essential needs that we really go and we ask the people what it is that they need. So it's specific and tailored to the people on that community in that community. And through that meet their material needs and just uplift the condition on that camp so that they can afford the peace of mind to think about something else, right? They don't have to worry about when the next meal is coming, or whether to be sleeping out in the freezing cold because they don't have a sleeping bag or jacket or anything like that. we do our best to cover these things with the help of wonderful donors and volunteers and people that just come out and help out in any way they can. But even outside of our network of organizations, there are a lot of churches, nonprofit organizations, independent people who just are just looking out, looking out for the unhoused people, right? Not everybody's in it, understanding the political aspect behind it. Some people just want to help people when there's nothing wrong with that, right? But there's only so far that that can go. We can only help out so much until we have to truly understand what's causing these issues and what's the root of the problem and how do we address that so we're not uh, either feeding into this issue or just inevitably continuing it forever and ever and ever, forcing us to have to provide these services forever and ever and ever.
So what you're telling me is Dallas Stops Evictions and Camp Rhonda are not indeed end goals, but simply a means to an ends.
Right. In the short term, it provides a security against like state violence, the sweeps, just harassment by police in general, anything like that, even protection from harmful people in that community.
Mm.
So it provides that, but no, it's not an ultimate goal because, I mean, it's not the end goal because housing is the end goal, but real housing, right? Real housing solutions. We talk to people about what are the reasons why either they haven't gotten into any of the housing programs that are available because the answers we hear, the resources are very limited, so you have to be on a wait list for at least a year, 2 years. The restrictions are, I mean, the policies and the guidelines they have are extremely restrictive, and they're not satisfactory to the people, and because of that, that's like a barrier to wanting to even get into that kind of a program, right? People shouldn't be given housing with restrictions, right? Housing is a human right. It's a basic need, right? We
What
should.
kind of restrictions are there?
So I mean, as far as the transitional housing goes and the shelters go, the more short-term solutions they have, they're very restrictive in the hours in which you can come and go. You have specific smoke breaks. There's rules like you can't bring your pets, you can't bring your family members. So, and you have to, whatever belong. Let's say I have a tent with stuff in it, I have to reduce that down to a bag, you know. And it's like why though, and then these guidelines are arbitrary because we were out there last Tuesday, and OHS, the interim director Kevin Oden, came out with this team trying to get people signed up to get into the hotel, the temporary hotel that they're trying to get people into, um, while they shut down Camp Rhonda. That's their compassionate resolution, is getting people into a 2-week hotel with all these restrictive guidelines and stuff. And they even had somebody there, resolution coordinator, right? Somebody on the team, which was talking to the people about the reasons why they didn't want to get signed up for the hotel. And they brought up these reasons as far as the restrictions and stuff like that goes. And he was working with them to try and get these restrictions removed, right, for these particular people. And I'm like, well, if you can do that, then why not just have the restrictions removed in general, right? Why are they even there in the first place if they're so arbitrary and you can move them like that? And he said that, well, we always have to have rules and guidelines when we're getting federal funding and stuff like that. Just a bunch of nonsense answers. And ultimately, what happened was they tell people that they're going to whatever remove these restrictions for them, but then they get to the hotel and those restrictions are still in place, right? So they're essentially tricking people or manipulating people into signing up for these hotels to make themselves look good when they don't really care about the needs of the people. Because what happens after that 2 weeks, right? They either get out of the hotel and they have to go back to Camp Rhonda, or they go from the hotel to a shelter which said has all these restrictions, and the shelters aren't even doing work to actively get people into housing. And if they are, it's at a very small percentage and at a slow rate than what they could be doing with the resources that the city has.
In a more ideal situation, what would you like to see your organizations be able to do? in like a semi-realistic but ideal situation?
Ultimately, I mean, so we've put together a list of demands, right, based off of this um, kind of mobilization that we've gotten around Camp Rhonda and everybody wanting to get involved and just learn in general about the struggle. We put together a list of demands, and ultimately, in the list of demands, the driving point is the community land trust, which is something that we can work towards under this, you know, operating under this system and under these institutions that we have put in place. We can get ultimately vacant properties that are owned by the city put into a community land trust. Um, and by definition, in the way they have it in our city of Dallas, or even in the more national sense, is that nonprofits go and buy these properties or whatever, and they put them into the community land trust. Since none of us are nonprofit organizations, and we don't have that level of funding as the 501c nonprofit organizations do, we're telling the city to put properties into the community land trust, right? Turn these vacant properties over. If you're looking to provide a solution for homelessness, provide some homes, right? And what we've seen happen across the nation with other organizations that are implementing the community land trust strategy is the city turns over the worst property they have. Either they're vacant lots or they're extremely rundown properties, and it's on the community, on the people to build these properties back up to code, because they're basically like, oh, if you want to do everything yourselves, we'll let you do everything yourselves. And we're not against that, right? We will do, I mean, we will find the people and the resources to get the job done, but we understand that the city, specific the city of Dallas, has a $4 billion budget, right? They put $12 million into Office of Homeless Solutions, and just to show the disparity in the way that they divide their budget up, there's a $509 million police department budget, and there was an extreme push during the summertime to reduce funding from the department budget and put that into other services that are going to reduce crime in other ways, right? Reduce poverty and uplift people out of the state of needing to commit crimes in order to survive, right? Many crimes are petty small crimes that are, either small theft or stuff like that. And so we understand that if the government were to do its job, which we know that this government isn't going to do it, or else they would have done it by now. But we just need to expose them and point these kind of contradictions out about the fact that the city of Dallas is the 14th richest city in the nation. They have a $4 billion budget. They easily have the resources and the properties and the ability to do these things and house every person in the city, but they're not going to do it because they would rather spend that money towards things that benefit them, and they can make money off of it, which is what we're seeing happen. Um, the properties even that they do own, that DHA owns, their public housing apartments and stuff like that, they're selling them to private investors. They're selling off even the little properties that they do own, they're selling them off. And the ones that are operating apartment complexes, we see the conditions change drastically when it goes from being a DHA and owned property to a private owned property that is essentially trying to drive out all these low income people who are on public housing, drive them all out and tear down the apartment complex, build up something nicer that they can rent out for more money and make more money off of it. Because that's what happens when housing is privatized and commodified. The driving factor is, um, which is why in many apartment complexes across the city and across the nation, you see extremely low conditions, right? Low living conditions, no money being put into maintaining and upgrading the apartment complex, but the landlord wants his rent at the first of the month. Every time the lease ends, the rent is increasing. They promise upgrades, they promise these kinds of stuff, but they don't do anything. So they're upping the rent, getting money, squeezing every little penny and dime out of every single tenant they have, but they're not putting any money into upgrading the apartments to maximize profits. And you see that within non-public housing and public housing that's being transferred over into private ownership. So ultimately, we want our organization to, we want the city to work with our organizations, right? The grassroots organizations that are actually have the relationship with the communities and are made up of people in the community. So we have a list of demands that we created based off of what has been brought to us, the issues that have been brought up to us by the unhoused people across the city, both nearby Camp Rhonda, which is a heavily densely populated area of houseless people, also by City Hall. We've heard what they had to say, and we formed these demands off of what they had to say. The first few demands are regarding sweeps and displacement of unhoused people. And then we get into more of the policies on how we're going to provide solutions. And these demands are, you can find them on any of our social medias, which I'll plug in at the end of this interview. But the demand states that we demand the City of Dallas work with local grassroots organizations to transfer ownership of Dallas Housing Authority, DHA city-owned properties into a permanent, community-controlled community land trust for permanent and sustainable low-income housing to be administered by local community control committees. We demand as many vacant spaces be put to use with sustainable individual housing for its current unhoused population necessary.
And how has this been received by city officials and any form of cops and government people that you have talked to?
They have not made any specific statement regarding the community land trust demand. We're looking to more officially, so this demands were formed last week, and we've just been gathering signatures. We have close to 600 signatures on the online petition, and we're working getting more in-person signatures as well. So we've been going out there and consistently getting signatures. We don't know what the amount of signatures that we're going to need, but the whole point of the petition is to more so get the community involved and unified around these demands and to make them feel invested in the struggle. And it shows the city like, hey, we got numbers and we got people that are supporting these demands, you know? Um, And so, as how have they received it? We haven't really gotten any official statement from them. We know they've seen the demands, right? It's reached their tables, whether it's the council member, whether it's code compliance or Office of Homeless Solutions, they have seen the demands. We're planning on getting into the city council meeting this Wednesday and actually reading out the demands so we know that they not only have seen them, we're going to officially send them out to their offices, but they've also heard them. And from there, we're going to see how receptive they are to our demands and whether they're willing to somewhat negotiate, or we need to escalate and get our voices.
As I understand it, the city of Dallas has attempted to disband Camp Rhonda, correct? Imposing several $1,000 fines per day.
Right. So on January 27th, they sent out a code violation to the property owner stating that the land is being used for illegal purposes and it's not being used for what it's intended for. The property is zoned for industrial manufacturing, and technically it is being used for residential purposes, I guess, since people are living on it, right? I don't know if that's the argument that they're trying to make, or that it shouldn't be used for an encampment regardless, but they are saying that it's zoned for industrial manufacturing and it's being used for illegal purposes. And
And
if
I've been to Camp Rhonda. There's a house, like several houses right next to it.
Yeah, yeah, there's a house right next door to it, and right down the street there's another house. I don't know what the zoning of the entire street is, right? I'm assuming if this property is industrial zoning, then the properties around it are industrial zoning as well. This just seems like a bogus reason that the city's just trying to crack down on the encampment, looking for any reason that they can. We've gotten a couple complaints from the city prior to this over the last few months, and they got in direct contact with the property owner regarding trash, like litter, and we've been consistently on top of it, whether it's the people in the community, volunteers, organizers, just on top of keeping the trash under control, getting it thrown out. The city comes by and picks up the dumpsters, but whatever isn't can't fit in the dumpsters, they won't throw away. So we take the trash out ourselves about once a week, take about a truck bed full of trash out. And so, we're on top of these issues, right? We work with the neighbors. There's a skate park across the street. They've raised some concerns to us. Obviously, like I said, nothing is perfect, so they raised their concerns to us, and we worked together and cooperated with each other to get these concerns, addressed, and keep the trash to a minimum. Keep the cars parked more towards our side of the street and our side of things, and just keeping things running smoothly in general. So we're on that constantly, which is something that the city should take in mind before they shut down something that's so beneficial to the community, and also something that provides an immediate network for mutual aid organizations and people that want to provide services to our unhoused, right? And what we've seen with this kind of permanent it's not a permanent solution, but it's a permanent area where people can have their belongings there. Their caseworkers know where to find them, whether it's a social worker and needs to come find them on a certain time and day. They know where to come look for them. They get mail. We have a mailbox put up. They get mail sent out to it, whether they need their paperwork and stuff like that figured out. So there's a lot of positives and benefits that come with it, and those definitely outweigh the negatives. So we would like to open that line of communication with the city and try to cooperate with the city as well and see what we can do to ensure the safety of everybody in the community, and make sure, since we know Camp Rhonda is providing such a safe and secure place for our unhoused people, what can we do to keep it up and going, right? But ultimately, we understand that since power is in numbers, right? Since we, as both the people in the community, organizers who are in solidarity with them, we have the numbers essentially. So we have the power to basically stand our ground and not go anywhere, which is the ultimate plan.
So, what's the plan for dealing with the most short-term city concerns? Are you going to try to get rezoned, or are you going to try to push demands as much as possible and hope that the
So
city officials
in the
themselves?
demands, in the demands, obviously, so the city has a memorandum dated to December 4th regarding the temporary suspension of encampment resolution efforts, which is how it's titled. That was dated December 4th. It had a 1 month time frame, and then by word of mouth, we know that it's got extended. Um, I want to say they don't have an end date on it, right? Because they haven't put out an official statement when they're going to stop uh, enforcing or following this memorandum. This is what Kevin Odin told me, at least when he came out there. He said they're still following the memorandum, meaning that they can't sweep up any encampments. It says memorandum regarding the temporary suspension of the encampment resolution efforts. It says in quotes, if individual housing options are not available, allow people who are living unsheltered or in encampments to remain where they are. The memorandum provides this memorandum provides plenty of evidence and discussion of enabling encampments to remain as is. It also cites the CDC guidelines for encampment services during the pandemic. That's in our list of demands, right? That's our first demand regarding city immediately stopping all the sweeps, evictions, encampment resolutions. Then our second demand talks about the rezoning. So it says the city of Dallas sanction Camp Rhonda and allow for expedited zoning the land for residential purposes. We demand all nearby encampments be allowed to become permanent and recognized as legal, given the same efforts. And we demand an immediate moratorium on fines and citations to the property owner, right? Because we know that they gave us the 10 days, right? They said from January 27th, they're going to come and do an inspection on February 6th. If the lot isn't to expectation on February 6th, then they start fining the property owner up to $2,000 daily, and they'll do inspections throughout that 10 day to the 30th day to see um, basically if it's to expectation. If it's not, then they can come and physically clear up the camp, and all fences are put on the property owner, or they can put a lien out on the actual property and basically take the property owner's land away from them. So that's why in our demands, enforcing the city recognized Camp Rhonda as legal, so they can't do any of those things. But ultimately, regardless of if they do any of those things, we know, and the people in the community know, they're gonna have to come through all of us and physically remove us, before we're leaving. We're not just gonna get up and leave, even if you find the property owner $2,000 a day, which we've had people reach out that are willing to, eat some fines and pay for some of them. It's not right though. Either way, it's not right. I mean, we know we're not moving, but the city needs to do the right thing and not punish the property owner for not wanting to press trespassing charges on on the houseless people chose to set up an encampment on his property out of necessity, right? Just because he has a heart doesn't mean the city should punish him.
I'm curious to see if the city would even care if we found a way to monetize this. If we start bringing in money somehow, and we made it a business. Technically, it's industry, right? So we got to sell like merch or something, and then all of a sudden you have a business.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have any ways people at home could help you other than like eating fines and that sort of thing?
So I mean, our petition is online, right? So if you go to any of our social medias, so we have the Dallas Stops Evictions Instagram. We're on Facebook under the same name. Our Twitter is DTX Stops, like EVCTNS. So it's like an abbreviated Dallas Stops Evictions or DTX Stops Evictions. And then we have our Camp Rhonda 2620 Instagram as well. If you look in the bios of any of those, there's a link tree with access to the demands as well as the petition. So you can sign the petition, um, just spread the word in general about what this particular issue with Camp Rhonda, but also the general struggle of being unhoused in Dallas when there's probably about 30 empty properties for every unhoused person. That's a rough estimate, but just by knowing in the work that we do in the apartment complexes and all that kind of stuff, half of them are just sitting empty because the conditions are so abhorrent and insane. That's why people don't want to live there. But we could work towards making the conditions right and renting these properties out at a much more reasonable price, a reasonable percentage of people's income rather than people paying more than 50% of their income on a property on a unit that has black mold. And so, that's ultimately the struggle, right? That's the main struggle here is to just get permanent. I say affordable, right? But the word affordable has been twisted by the city and real estate developers to mean unaffordable. So we use the terminology extremely low income, safe housing for everybody, right? And and these things could be met immediately if the city or this system and this government were to do that actual thing and use the extreme amount of wealth and resources that it has towards meeting the basic needs of the people.
Okay, great. Thank you for your time today, and I hope that we get to talk soon. We'll be keeping an eye on Camp Rhonda and Dallas Stops Evictions in the near future. And take care.
Thank you very much.